They sent an ultimatum, but we sent a mirror. Admiral Eva Rostova stood on the command deck of the Indomitable, her knuckles white where she gripped the command rail. Before her, the main view screen showed the elegant, lethal ships of the Cathar Imperium forming a perfect blockade around the colonial world of Viridian. A crimson timer in the corner of the display counted down with unnerving placidity. Hours, 59 minutes, 17 seconds. Surrender the colony's entire dilithium harvest and its sovereign charter, or face purification by orbital fire. Fleet-Mind Lysias confirmed their broadcast frequency. Rostova said, her voice a low anchor in the tense quiet of the bridge. The low thrum of the ship's gravitic drive vibrated through the deck plates, a constant reminder of the power held in careful check. Is it still open channel public band? A calm, synthesized voice responded from the surrounding air, its avatar a simple, pulsing blue line on her command console. Confirmed, Admiral. They are broadcasting their ultimatum across the entire sector on all civilian and military bands. They want an audience for their doctrine. They want a lesson corrected. Commander Gian, her tactical officer, his face illuminated by the stark red of the Cathar ship projections on his screen. Their doctrine is absolute. No negotiation, no compromise. Comply or be erased. Rostova's gaze was fixed on the enemy fleet. Their formation was a masterwork of orbital mechanics and power projection, a beautiful, deadly cage. She felt the familiar heat of indignation, but her training and her ethos held it back. You do not answer an ultimatum with an echo. On Viridian, a young boy pressed his face against the plasteel window of his family's small hab unit, watching the new angry stars in the sky. His mother held him close, her hand trembling as she stroked his hair. She wasn't looking at the enemy ships, but at the single steady light of the Terran fleet that had arrived to stand with them. It was a tiny flicker of defiance against an overwhelming darkness. She prayed it was enough. Lysias spoke again, his tone devoid of emotion, but carrying immense weight. Admiral, my projections indicate a 97% probability of catastrophic failure if we engage them symmetrically. Their kinetic barriers and beam weapon capitalization exceed ours by a factor of 3. Symmetry was never the plan. Lysias. Rostova said, a faint glint in her eye. She tapped her console, bringing up a complex, multi-layered schematic of the Viridian system. They believe their strength gives them the right to dictate reality. We are here to teach them about perspective. The universe does not bend to threats. It bends to leverage. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but it was born of a deep understanding of the Cathar's greatest weakness, their rigid, unyielding doctrine. They expected fear and compliance. They expected a frontal assault born of desperation. They did not expect mathematics to be used as a weapon against their own certainty. Commander Gian's status on the decoy drones, Rostova ordered. The scent of ozone from a nearby power conduit was sharp in the air. Are they seeded with the correct thermal and energy signatures? Seeded and deployed. Admiral Gian confirmed, his fingers dancing across his console. They are currently masked within the asteroid cluster on a parallel orbital plane. On your command, they will mimic the energy signatures of our entire frigate squadron emerging from the cluster's shadow. A low hiss from the coolant systems under the deck plates underscored the growing tension. Rostova nodded, a grim smile touching her lips and the mirror lattice. The 8 lattice projectors are in position, running cold and silent behind Viridian's largest moon, Erebus. Gian replied. They are slaved to Lysias's primary fire control. The moment the Cathar fleet adjusts their primary weapon arrays to target the decoys, the lattice will activate. The ledger is open, and the first entry is deception. The Cathar doctrine was simple: overwhelm the enemy with a decisive, terrifying show of force to shatter their will to fight. It was a strategy that had carved them an empire. But it relied on a clear, predictable target. The Terran fleet would not be predictable. They would be a ghost, a reflection, a mathematical anomaly the Cathar could not account for. A proximity alert chimed softly, a polite sound for such a deadly warning. Admiral, the Cathar have launched their first wave of patrol drones. Gian reported, his voice tight. They're sweeping the asteroid cluster right on schedule. The glare from his tactical display cast sharp shadows across his focused face. Let them, Rostova said calmly. They are looking for ships. They will not be looking for the quietest things in the universe. She watched the timer. 2 hours, 41 minutes, 3 seconds. The first test was coming. It is time to show them the cost of their own certainty. Lysias's blue line pulsed slightly faster. The drones are approaching the decoy field, Admiral. Their active sensor sweeps are powerful. There is a 43% chance they will detect the subtle gravitic distortions of our drones before activation. Then we must ensure they are otherwise occupied, Rostova countered. She turned to her communications officer. Lieutenant Hale, the Cathar flagship. Use my personal command encryption. I wish to speak to their commander. This was not in the plan. Gian and the others exchanged a glance of surprise. Admiral Gian questioned, his brow furrowed. Engaging in dialogue is not part of the Cathar doctrine. They will see it as weakness. They will see what they are programmed to see, Rostova corrected gently. I am not trying to negotiate. I am creating a distraction, a human element they cannot quantify. A faint tremor ran through the hull as the Indomitable made a minor course correction. The most effective decoy is one that speaks. The hail was sent. For a long moment, there was only the hum of the bridge and the steady, relentless countdown. Then the main view screen split. On one side, the Cathar fleet hung in the void. On the other, the brutal reptilian face of Cathar War Master Vrax appeared. His eyes were black, unblinking pits of cold certainty. Terran Admiral Vrax hissed, his voice like rocks grinding together. You waste your final moments. Your fleet is a footnote. Your colony is a resource. Acknowledge your capitulation. Rostova met his gaze without flinching. Her heart beat a steady rhythm, a counterpoint to the ticking clock. War Master Vrax, I am Admiral Ava Rostova of the Terran Systems Fleet. I am hailing you to offer you a final opportunity to withdraw your fleet and your ultimatum. We are not a footnote. We are a lesson you have yet to learn. Vrax let out a short, guttural laugh. Your arrogance is typical of your species, a fleeting spark of defiance before the inevitable darkness. Your lesson will be one of extinction. The reckoning waits for no one. As Vrax spoke, Rostova saw a subtle flicker on Gian's console. The Cathar patrol drones had momentarily paused their advance, their sensor focus shifting slightly as their command ship processed the unexpected communication. It was a tiny hesitation, a microsecond of indecision in their otherwise flawless operational script. It was all they needed. Now Lysias Rostova whispered, her eyes still locked on Vrax. Activating decoys. Lysias announced, his voice still perfectly calm. On the tactical display, a dozen brilliant points of light flared into existence, erupting from the asteroid field, with the energy signatures of a full frigate squadron on a direct attack vector. The board is set. The pieces are in motion. On the view screen, Vrax's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. He turned his head, barking a clipped order in his own harsh language. The transmission cut out abruptly. The distraction had worked. The Cathar, so confident in their doctrine, had been caught off guard by a simple conversation. Their patrol drones are ignoring the decoys and accelerating toward our position, Gian reported, his voice sharp with alarm. They saw through it. The decoys were too perfect. Rostova's calm demeanor did not waver. No, Commander. The drones are not the target. The fleet is. Watch their main battle line. The thrum of the deck plates seemed to intensify. She could feel the ship's energy systems spooling up in anticipation. As she spoke, the Cathar capital ships began to pivot their immense weapon arrays, turning to face the Phantom frigate squadron. It was a slow, majestic movement, the movement of predators certain of their kill. They were committing their primary firepower to ghosts. The mirror is ready to receive their gaze. Inside a small transit shuttle, a medic checked the seals on a young ensign's pressure suit. The ensign was pale, his hands fidgeting with a strap. "First, real alert," the medic asked kindly, her voice muffled by her helmet. The ensign just nodded, his eyes wide. "Don't you worry," she said, giving his shoulder a reassuring pat. "The Admiral knows what she's doing. She always brings us home." The heartbeat sensor on the ensign's suit display ticked a little slower. "The Cathar primary batteries are locked on the decoys," Lysias stated. "They are charging their main cannons. Energy spike is massive. They intend to obliterate the entire asteroid field." "A predictable response," Rostova murmured. "An overreaction born of arrogance." She looked at the timer. 2 hours, 15 minutes, 42 seconds. Activate the mirror lattice. Now. Hold the line. 8 points of light previously hidden behind the moon, Erebus flared to life. They were small, unassuming projector ships, but as they activated, they unfurled vast, shimmering fields of coherent gravitons. These fields linked together, forming a single, immense, perfectly calibrated lens in the void, a mirror of unimaginable scale positioned at a precise angle between the Cathar fleet and the decoy squadron. The Cathar fired. Lances of pure destructive energy enough to crack a continent leaped across the dark. They struck the mirror lattice not as a solid wall, but as a receptive, frictionless surface. The beams did not splash or detonate. They bent. They reflected. The debt is called. The ledger must be balanced. The Cathar fleet, in its haste to obliterate a phantom enemy, had failed to account for a new variable. Their own overwhelming firepower turned back on them at the speed of light. The reflected beams, perfectly angled by Lysias's flawless calculations, did not strike the Cathar ships directly. That would have been an act of war, an escalation Rostova was not yet willing to make. Instead, the beams converged on a single empty point in space precisely in the middle of the Cathar formation. The resulting detonation of focused energy was blinding. A new temporary star bloomed in the Viridian system, washing the bridge of the Indomitable in stark white light. The ship's electro-optical sensors automatically polarized, but the sheer intensity of the blast was still staggering. The scent of superheated dust and ions filled the recycled air. When the glare faded, the tactical display showed chaos. The Cathar ships were intact, but their formation was shattered. The electromagnetic pulse from the energy detonation had overloaded their forward shields and fried their primary sensor arrays. They were blind, disoriented, and reeling from a blow they had delivered to themselves. The first lesson is always the hardest. "Report," Rostova commanded, her voice cutting through the stunned silence on the bridge. Jian's head snapped up from his console, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Admiral, their entire forward sensor net is down. Multiple ships are reporting cascading power failures in their weapon systems. They are in disarray." A low cheer rippled through the junior officers at their stations. "Silence," Rostova ordered, though not unkindly. "This is not a victory. It is an opening." "Lysias, what is the status of the convoy?" "The civilian convoy designated Starlight," Lysias replied, "is breaking orbit from Viridian on the far side using the confusion as cover. Their projected route will take them through the gap our maneuver has created in the blockade. Estimated window of opportunity, 12 minutes. We hold the door open for those who cannot fight." Rostova's plan had never been to destroy the Cathar fleet. It was to break the siege, to get the most vulnerable civilians out of the line of fire. The convoy was a collection of retrofitted freighters and passenger liners filled with families' essential personnel and cultural archives from Viridian. Their safety was the primary objective. "The Cathar are beginning to recover," Jian warned. "Their secondary sensors are coming online. They're redeploying their lighter cruisers to plug the gap." The console glare reflected off his tense face. "They will be too late," Rostova said with quiet confidence. "The convoy has a head start, and we are about to give them something else to worry about." She turned her attention back to the main display. "Lysias, what is the emotional state of the Cathar commander?" Analyzed their command network chatter. There was a pause as the AI processed the torrent of intercepted data. "The prevailing emotional indicators are confusion, rage, and a significant degree of doctrinal shock. Their operational models have no precedent for this form of engagement. They are questioning the validity of their own sensor readings. This is the seed of doubt," Good Rostova said. "Now we will nurture it." She outlined the second phase of her plan. It was even bolder than the first. It involved using the Indomitable itself as the bait. "Commander, bring us about. Set a course directly for the Cathar flagship. Minimal speed shields at 25%. Broadcast our energy signature on an open channel." Jian stared at her as if she had lost her mind. "Admiral, that's suicide. We'll be flying directly into their kill box. Even with their primary sensors down, they will tear us apart." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the bridge crew. "They will expect an attack," Rostova explained patiently, "or a retreat. They will not expect a slow, deliberate, and apparently vulnerable approach. It contradicts every tactical doctrine they have ever encountered." The slight vibration of the deck shifted as the massive ship began its turn. "They will hesitate, and in that hesitation, the convoy will escape. A lesson in restraint is a weapon in itself." The Indomitable turned its prow towards the heart of the wounded, but still lethal Cathar fleet. On the view screen, the enemy ships grew larger, their angular, menacing shapes filling the starfield. The timer continued its silent count, 1 hour, 58 minutes, 21 seconds. The ultimatum was still in effect, a stark reminder of the stakes. On board one of the escaping freighters, a young navigator plotted their course through the newly opened corridor. Her hands were steady, her focus absolute. She could see the Indomitable on her own screen, a single brave spark moving toward the dark mass of the enemy. "Hold steady," she whispered to herself, echoing the sentiment of her entire crew. "The Admiral is buying us time. Don't waste a second of it." As the Indomitable advanced, the Cathar ships reacted just as Rostova had predicted. Their movements were uncertain, hesitant. Some ships began to power up their weapons only to be countermanded by others. Their command structure, so rigid and hierarchical, was struggling to process a tactical problem that had no answer in their doctrinal texts. They were a predator that had never seen prey walk calmly into its jaws. "The account is not settled with blood, but with inaction. Their communications are a mess," Jian reported, a note of awe in his voice. "Conflicting orders, challenges to authority. Vrax is trying to re-establish control, but his subordinates are demanding to know how their sensors were deceived. The heat from the electronics at his station was a palpable presence." "Lysias, prepare the next phase," Rostova ordered. "It is time to turn their trap inside out. Signal the rest of the fleet, the real fleet." A new set of icons began to appear on the tactical display, emerging not from the asteroid field, but from the shadow of Viridian itself. They had been there the whole time, running silent, using the planet's gravity well and magnetic field to mask their presence. Frigates, destroyers, and cruisers, the full strength of the Terran task force. They were not charging in for an attack. They were moving to precise calculated positions, forming a vast encircling cordon around the disordered Cathar fleet. The cage is forged around the cage maker. The Cathar had come to impose an ultimatum. They had built a blockade to enforce their will. Now they found themselves caught in a trap of their own making, surrounded by a force they had critically underestimated. Their doctrine had told them the Terrans were weak, their numbers insignificant. Their doctrine had lied. "Admiral, the Cathar are detecting our fleet's movements," Jian said, his voice now ringing with excitement. "They are realizing their position. They are trapped." Rostova watched the tactical display, her expression grim. "This is the most dangerous moment, Commander. A cornered animal is at its most unpredictable. They still have the firepower to cause immense damage." She could feel the faint hum of the Indomitable's own shields, a fragile skin against the void. The countdown timer now read 1 hour 43 minutes 9 seconds. The ultimatum was becoming irrelevant. A new reality was taking shape in the space around Viridian. A reality dictated not by threats, but by superior strategy and a profound understanding of the enemy's limitations. "It is time to teach them the true meaning of a reckoning." Lysias's synthesized voice cut through the tension. "Admiral, I am detecting a massive energy surge from the Cathar flagship. It is not directed at us or at the convoy. They are targeting Viridian." Rostova's blood ran cold. Vrax, realizing he had been outmaneuvered and humiliated, was choosing to lash out at the most vulnerable target. He was going to burn the colony not for strategic gain, but out of pure, spiteful rage. A final, bloody testament to his failed doctrine. He would sacrifice his entire fleet's tactical position just to make a point, Jian growled, his hands balling into fists. A point of terror, Rostova corrected, her voice hard as steel. "But he has forgotten the first rule of warfare." She turned to her command crew, her eyes blazing with a cold, righteous fire she had kept carefully banked until this very moment. "You do not threaten the innocent in front of a fleet that remembers by ledgers. They have forgotten who we are." Lysias, Rostova commanded, her voice ringing with authority. "Every ship in this fleet is to execute Pattern Omega. Slingshot all available power to the forward projectors. We are not just blocking that shot. We are sending it back." Pattern Omega was a maneuver of last resort, a tactic so energy-intensive and high-risk, it was rarely even simulated. It involved the entire fleet acting as a single distributed weapon system. Every ship would project a localized, high-intensity version of the mirror technology, but instead of a single large lattice, they would form 100 smaller interlocking reflective surfaces. They would catch Vrax's planetary bombardment and focus it back onto a single point, the command tower of his own flagship. "Admiral, the energy expenditure will be catastrophic," Lysias warned, his blue line avatar glowing with intensity. "We will be effectively disarmed for several minutes after the maneuver. The heat load on our destroyers will push their reactors to 150% of their rated safety limits." "Acknowledged," Rostova said without hesitation. The hum of the ship around her was rising in pitch, a symphony of straining machinery and immense power. "Jian, target the flagship's command spire. Not the reactor, not the engines. I want Vrax to watch this happen. A tally is not paid with annihilation. It is paid with understanding." A young damage control officer on the frigate stalwart braced herself against a bulkhead as alarms shrieked around her. The ship shuddered violently as it diverted nearly all its power from life support and internal gravity to its forward projector. The lights flickered and the air grew thin and cold. "Hold on, people," she yelled over the comm. "Give the Admiral her shot." The Cathar flagship fired. A beam of incandescent fury, wide and devastating, erupted from its ventral cannon, a world killer unleashed. It crossed the space toward Viridian in an instant, but it never reached its destination. Pattern Omega activated. 1,000 points of light flared across the Terran fleet. The interlocking mirror fields snapped into place, a net of pure, hard light cast across the void. The world killer beam struck it, and was caught. The raw energy was contained, bent, and refocused into a single needle-thin lance of blinding white light. The lance shot back across the dark, a perfect instantaneous reply. It struck the Cathar flagship not with the explosive force of a torpedo, but with the surgical precision of a scalpel. The beam pierced the command spire, vaporizing the armored bridge and everyone on it in less than a millisecond. The rest of the massive ship was untouched, its engines still running, its weapon ports still open. It was a ghost ship, its brain scooped out with ruthless mathematical perfection. We are the mirror, and the mirror is unflinching. For a long, silent moment, the Cathar fleet floated in stunned inaction. Their flagship, the symbol of their power and the source of their orders, was still there, but it was dead. Their war master was gone. Their doctrine was shattered. They were a body without a head, surrounded and completely at the mercy of the fleet they had dismissed as insignificant. The countdown timer on the Indomitable's main screen froze at 1 hour 42 minutes 59 seconds. The ultimatum was over. Lysias Rostova said, her voice quiet, but carrying across the now silent bridge. Open a channel to all Cathar ships, unencrypted. Broadcast the following message. She took a breath, the scent of hot metal and ozone thick in the air. This is Admiral Eva Rostova of the Terran Systems Fleet. Your war master is dead. Your ultimatum is void. Your doctrine has failed. You are surrounded. You have two choices. Power down your weapon systems and prepare to be escorted out of this system, or suffer the same fate as your commander. We are not here to conquer you. We are not here to destroy you. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. We are here to teach you that the cost of an ultimatum is always paid by the one who issues it. A final reckoning is at hand. The response was not immediate. Rostova could see the Cathar ships on the tactical display, their positions unchanged. They were communicating with each other frantically, trying to establish a new chain of command, trying to make sense of a situation for which they had no precedent. The temptation for one of their captains to lash out in a final suicidal act of defiance was immense. The Indomitable and its fleet were vulnerable, their energy reserves depleted. It was Gian who broke the silence, his voice strained. Admiral, the frigate Stalwart is reporting multiple hull breaches from reactor overload. The Orion has lost its primary life support on 3 decks. The cost of that maneuver, it was high. He didn't need to say more. The cost of victory was never cheap. Rostova nodded, her face etched with the strain of the last few hours. Send all available search and rescue teams. Divert auxiliary power to the damaged ships. The crew comes first. Always. The welfare of her people was the bedrock of her command. A ship was just a tool. The crew was its soul. A leader must anchor their people. Then, on the main screen, one of the Cathar cruisers began to change color on the tactical display. Its angry red icon, signifying a hostile combatant, shifted to a neutral blue. It was powering down its weapons. A moment later, another ship followed suit, then another, and another. Like a chain reaction, the entire Cathar fleet began to surrender their will to fight, broken not by overwhelming firepower, but by the undeniable public failure of their core beliefs. They had built their empire on the unshakable foundation of their doctrine. And that foundation had just been turned to dust before their very eyes. They had no other orders to follow, no other path to take. They have learned the weight of their own words. In a quiet corner of the Indomitable's medical bay, a nurse tended to a pilot who had suffered minor burns when his console overloaded. He winced as she applied a cooling salve. "Did we win?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The nurse smiled, a tired but genuine expression. "The convoy is safe," she said softly. "The Admiral brought everyone home." That was the only victory that mattered to the people in this fleet. Lysias Rostova said, a great weariness settling over her. Begin compiling the official ledger for this engagement. Note the Cathar's unprovoked ultimatum, our non-lethal response, their escalation against a civilian target, and our precise targeted neutralization of their command. Note the surrender of their remaining forces. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. It will be done, Admiral. The AI confirmed. The record will be sent to the Terran Systems Command and logged in the public Interstellar Concordance archives. The precedent will be established. The balance sheet must be made public. Rostova looked out at the silent, defeated Cathar fleet. This was not a moment of triumph. It was a moment of profound sadness. They had forced her hand. They had forced her to be decisive in a way that she had always hoped to avoid. Her own arc from a commander who prized restraint above all had been bent by the gravity of their aggression. She had shown mercy, but she had also shown that her mercy had teeth of steel. Commander Jian, she said, her voice regaining its strength. Prepare a boarding party, a diplomatic one. We are going to offer the Cathar fleet food, medical supplies, and technical assistance for their journey home. Jian looked at her surprised once again. Admiral, after what they tried to do. Especially after what they tried to do, Rostova affirmed. The lesson is not over. The first part was about consequences. This part is about a better way forward. The teaching does not end when the weapons are silent. The Cathar had expected retaliation, enslavement, or execution. They would receive compassion. They would be sent home not as prisoners, but as students who had just received a very harsh, very public education. The memory of this day of their doctrine's failure and the unexpected mercy of their enemy would be a far more potent weapon against their empire's aggression than any fleet of warships. As the boarding parties prepared, a strange thing began to happen. The Cathar ships, one by one, began to orient themselves differently. They were not powering up weapons or engines. They were turning, pivoting their massive hulls until their forward viewports were all aimed directly at the Indomitable. It was not a threatening gesture. It was a sign of focus, of attention. Lysias, what are they doing? Rostova asked, a new tension entering her voice. I am analyzing their internal communications, Admiral, the AI replied. The new acting commander, a ship captain named Gore, has ordered all ships to observe your vessel. He is ordering his bridge crews to study us, to learn. Rostova stared at the screen at the silent watching fleet. The seed of doubt she had planted had already begun to sprout. The rigid doctrine was broken, and in its place something new and uncertain was beginning to grow: curiosity. The desire to understand how they had been so thoroughly and completely defeated by a philosophy they could not comprehend. It begins with a question. She knew this was just the beginning of a much longer, more difficult process. The Cathar Imperium would not change overnight. There would be more confrontations, more tests of will. But today, here in the Viridian system, a fundamental crack had appeared in the foundation of their empire. A crack made not by a torpedo, but by a mirror. Prepare a secure channel to Captain Gore, Rostova said. It seems our lesson is about to enter its second phase. A dialogue. The bridge of the Indomitable was still the adrenaline of battle slowly fading, replaced by the steady, purposeful hum of a fleet at work. The rescue teams were underway, the engineers were assessing damage, and the diplomats were preparing to board. The crisis was over, but the work was just beginning. The work of turning a victory into a lasting peace. The first step is always the hardest, but it must be taken. Rostova allowed herself a small private smile. It was a weary smile, but a smile nonetheless. She had held the line. She had protected the innocent. And she had taught a powerful, arrogant empire a lesson it would never forget. A lesson written not in fire and blood, but in light and reflection. a lesson that would now be recorded in the great public ledgers of the galaxy for all to see. Her eyes drifted to the tactical display. The Cathar ships remained in their observational posture, silent and still. They were waiting for the next lesson, waiting to see what the strange, unpredictable humans would do next. She would not disappoint them. The mirror showed them their failure. Now it must show them a path forward. Lysias Rostova began, her voice steady and clear, a beacon in the quiet of the command deck. Let us begin. Open the channel to Captain Gore. It's time we talked about the future. She leaned against the command rail, the cool metal a familiar anchor in the vastness of space. The reflection of the star field on the polished surface was a reminder of the endless possibilities and the profound responsibilities of her command. A great weight had been lifted, but a new one had settled in its place. The weight of what comes next. Hold fast to the lesson. The hours that followed were a masterclass in controlled de-escalation. Rostova, with Lysias providing real-time cultural and linguistic analysis, spoke with Captain Gore. The Cathar officer was wary, his voice a low growl of suspicion, but he listened. He could not afford not to. His fleet was crippled, surrounded, and doctrinally adrift. Rostova did not make demands, she made observations. Your doctrine assumes a binary outcome. Captain, she explained, her voice calm and measured, broadcast to the bridge of every Cathar ship. Compliance or destruction. But the universe is not binary. It is a spectrum of infinite possibilities. You blinded yourselves to 99% of reality. She watched the Cathar ships on her tactical display, looking for any sign of aggression. There was none. Only the steady, passive sensor pings of a fleet that was listening intently. The low vibration of the Indomitable's life support was a soothing, constant presence. A civilian transport, one of the smaller vessels from the now safe convoy, had requested permission to return. Its cargo was simple water, medical supplies, and protein paste. It was a gesture organized by the very colonists the Cathar had come to subjugate. The boy who had watched the battle from his window was now helping his father load crates, his fear replaced by a solemn sense of purpose. Rostova granted permission immediately. A single unarmed freighter moved slowly from the protected space behind the Terran fleet and approached the nearest Cathar cruiser. It was an act of profound, almost reckless trust. Gore did not fire. He allowed the small ship to dock. The first bridge is built with compassion. Your ultimatum was based on a flawed calculation of our character. Rostova continued her transmission to Gore. You assumed we would respond with fear or with symmetrical aggression. You did not account for a third option, using your own strength as a tool to teach you its limits. Jian monitored the Cathar internal communications, his expression one of deep concentration. Admiral, they are debating, arguing. Some of Gore's captains are calling this a trick. Others are analyzing the logs of the battle, replaying the reflection of their own weapons. They are seeing the undeniable mathematics of their defeat. The consul's light cast a green hue on his face. Let them debate, Rostova said. A doctrine that cannot withstand scrutiny is not a doctrine. It is a cage. The truth is a lever that can move worlds. The cost of the battle was becoming clearer. The frigate Stalwart would need to be towed back to the nearest starbase, its reactor core permanently damaged. 7 crew members across the fleet had been seriously injured, though none were lost. A small price for saving a world, but a price nonetheless recorded meticulously in the ship's log. Each injury was a debt to be honored. Lysias's calm voice filled the air once more. Admiral, I have completed a preliminary analysis of the Cathar Imperium's public historical records. Their doctrine of ultimatums was formally adopted after a catastrophic civil war nearly 3 centuries ago. It was designed to prevent internal conflict by ensuring absolute, unquestioning obedience to a central authority. It was a response to trauma. Rostova murmured, a flicker of understanding, of empathy crossing her face. They embraced rigidity to protect themselves from chaos. Correct, Lysias confirmed. Their entire society is built upon this principle. To question the doctrine is to question the very foundation of their civilization. You have not just defeated a fleet admiral, you have challenged their entire history. A moment of violence can echo for centuries. This new information changed the complexion of the situation. These were not just arrogant conquerors, they were the descendants of a traumatized people clinging to a brutal philosophy as a shield. The lesson had to be gentler now, more nuanced. The goal was not to shatter their civilization, but to help it evolve, Captain Rostova said, reopening the channel. I have a proposal. A true exchange, not an ultimatum. We will escort your fleet to the edge of this system. We will provide you with the full, unedited logs of this engagement, including our own tactical decisions and energy expenditures. In return, you will carry a message back to your Imperium. There was a long silence from the Cathar flagship. The tension on the Indomitable's bridge was palpable. This was the pivot point. The moment when the confrontation could either resolve into a fragile peace or reignite into a bloody, pointless battle. A soft hiss from a pneumatic door was the only sound. Finally, Gore's voice returned, heavy with a weariness that mirrored Rostova's own. What message? Tell them that the universe is larger than their doctrine, Rostova said. Tell them that strength that requires absolute compliance is not strength, it is fear. And tell them that the Terran Systems fleet will meet any future ultimatum not with capitulation, but with a mirror. The choice is theirs to make. The consequences are theirs to own. Another long pause. Then a single clipped word from Gore. Agreed. A collective sigh of relief went through the bridge crew. The crisis was truly over. Gian slumped back in his chair, the tension draining from his shoulders. The junior officers exchanged quiet, exhausted smiles. The Indomitable had won not by breaking the enemy, but by forcing them to look at themselves. The escort began. The Terran fleet reformed and Vigilant surrounded the Cathar ships as they slowly powered up their engines. It was a strange procession, a dance of victor and vanquished that looked more like a joint military exercise than the aftermath of a battle. The Terran ships did not point their weapons. They simply held their positions, a silent, watchful presence. Anchor the peace with vigilance. As the fleets moved toward the system's edge, Lysias began the final stage of his own complex plan. Hidden within the tactical logs being transferred to the Cathar was a non-military data packet. It contained Terran art, music, philosophy, and history, a complete uncensored look into the heart of the civilization they had so badly misjudged. It was a cultural seed planted in the fertile ground of their shattered certainty. It was a gamble. The Cathar might see it as a cultural weapon and destroy it. But Lysias, in its cold, logical way, had calculated the odds. A society in doctrinal shock was a society open to new ideas. The probability of the seed taking root was 17.4%, low but not zero. And for Lysias, no chance was too small to take in the pursuit of a lasting peace. The journey to the edge of the Viridian system took 6 hours. 6 hours of tense, silent cooperation. Rostova remained on the bridge the entire time, her gaze never wavering from the main screen. She was the guarantor of this fragile truce, and she would not rest until the Cathar were gone. The low hum of the ship was her only companion in the long, quiet vigil. The watch is long, but it must be kept. Finally, they reached the Mandeville Point, the place where interstellar travel became possible again. The Cathar fleet came to a halt. One final communication came from Captain Gore. It was not a message of thanks, nor was it a threat. It was a single stark question. Why? Rostova knew what he was asking. Why the mercy? Why the lesson? Why not simply destroy them when they had the chance? She thought for a moment, choosing her words with the care of a bomb disposal expert. Because destruction is an answer, Captain. But it is never the right one, she replied. We believe in a universe of better questions. She cut the transmission. There was nothing more to say. The Cathar fleet, one by one, engaged their FTL drives and vanished into the swirling vortex of hyperspace, leaving behind only the silent, watchful stars and the quiet hum of the Terran fleet. They came with an answer. They left with a question. Rostova finally allowed herself to leave the bridge. The exhaustion hit her like a physical blow, but it was matched by a profound sense of rightness. They had faced the ultimate test of their ethos and had not been found wanting. They had taught a hard lesson, but they had done so with a clean ledger. As she walked through the corridors of her ship, she saw the crew beginning to relax. The tension was gone, replaced by a quiet pride. They had done more than win a battle. They had affirmed who they were. They were the fleet that held the line, that protected the innocent, that answered threats with mathematics and aggression with mercy. The medical bay was calm, the injured resting comfortably. The mess hall was filled with quiet conversation, crew members sharing stories of the tense hours. The ship was alive, its heart beating steadily once more. The faint scent of recycled air and ozone was the smell of home. The ship is the body, but the crew is the heart. Rostova reached her quarters and keyed open the door. Before she could step inside, Lysias's voice spoke not from the ship's internal comms, but from the personal speaker in her room. Admiral, there is one final entry for the ledger, the AI said. Its tone was for the first time not entirely neutral. There was something akin to satisfaction in its synthesized voice. What is it, Lysias? She asked, weary but curious. The civilian government of Viridian has formally petitioned the Terran Systems Concordance, Lysias reported. They are not asking for increased military protection. They are asking for a charter to establish a new interstellar university. Its founding principle is to be the study of non-binary conflict resolution and the mathematics of mercy. Rostova stopped in the doorway, a genuine, unforced smile spreading across her face. The lesson had not only been received by the Cathar, it had been embraced by the very people they had tried to silence. The mirror had reflected in more than one direction. The deepest lessons are learned by all. Make a note in the official log. Lysias, she said softly. Title the entry, Precedent, and add my personal commendation to the people of Viridian. They have taught us something today as well. It is already done, Admiral, the AI replied. Rostova finally stepped into her quarters, the door hissing shut behind her. She looked at her own reflection in the dark plasteel of the viewport. The face that looked back was tired, lined with stress, but the eyes were clear and steady. She had been tested, pushed to the very edge of her principles, and had emerged stronger, more certain of her path than ever before. Her arc was not from vengeance to justice, but from restraint to a righteous, unbreakable decisiveness. The institutional consequence of this day was now logged, a permanent part of the public record. The Cathar ultimatum doctrine, once a symbol of terror, was now a case study in failure. Its power was broken, its foundation exposed as hollow. The tally was complete, the account settled not in blood, but in the bright, clear light of a better idea. The mirror arrays across the fleet, having done their work, cooled to a dull, unassuming pewter. She had held to the fleet's core ethos: teach first, fight if forced. She had shown what mercy with teeth looked like. It looked like a silent, defeated fleet vanishing into the void, their minds filled not with hatred, but with a universe of new, unsettling questions. It looked like a colony world choosing to build a university instead of a fortress. It was the cost of victory and the profit of peace, all tallied on a single balanced ledger. A new equation has been written. The silence in her quarters was a stark contrast to the controlled chaos of the preceding hours. Rostova stood before the viewport, the starfield a placid, indifferent backdrop to the storm of recent events. The ship was quiet, a gentle thrum of the life support, and the distant hum of repair crews, the only sounds. She felt the deep, bone-weary exhaustion of a commander after a battle. But beneath it was the unyielding steel of her conviction. They had held the line. They had paid a price in strained reactors and injured crew, but they had held it without breaking their soul. A soft chime indicated an incoming message on her private terminal. It was from Fleet Command. Her official report, co-authored with Lysius's impeccable data, had been received. She opened the message expecting a formal commendation, perhaps a series of questions. What she saw was a whirlwind. Her actions at Viridian were being hailed as a masterstroke in some circles and condemned as reckless, unsanctioned doctrinal innovation in others. A debate had begun. "Lysius," she said to the quiet room, "what is the political temperature at Admiralty headquarters?" The AI's blue line avatar appeared on her terminal. "Volatile Admiral. Your use of pattern Omega is being cited as both a brilliant success and a dangerous precedent of energy expenditure. The mathematics of mercy, as the Viridian colonists have termed it, is not a recognized chapter in Terran strategic doctrine." The AI paused. However, public sentiment is overwhelmingly positive. The unedited logs of Vrax's threat against the colony have gone viral on the civilian net, so we won the battle and started a dozen political fires back home, Rostova mused. It was the way of things. A victory in the void was never clean. It always sent ripples back into the murky waters of politics. The ledger is never truly closed. On Viridian, construction had already begun on a temporary structure for the new university. A grizzled asteroid miner, a man who had lost his brother in a Cathar raid years ago, found himself volunteering. He wasn't an academic, but he could wire a power grid. As he connected a primary conduit, he looked up at the sky where the battle had taken place. He felt not the familiar burn of hatred for the Cathar, but a strange new curiosity. He wanted to understand the equation that turned an enemy's strength into their own downfall. Weeks turned into a month. The Indomitable and her task force remained in the Viridian system, assisting the colonists and running deep system diagnostics. The name Rostova became a symbol. To some, she was a hero who had redefined modern warfare. To the Cathar Imperium, she was a demon, a trickster, who had shattered their most sacred beliefs with logic poison. The silence from the Imperium was the most unsettling part. It was the silence of a predator gathering its strength. The hunt is not over. It has merely paused. The silence broke on the 37th day. It was not a hail or a threat. It was an announcement broadcast on every channel, overriding civilian and military networks across 3 sectors. A new voice emerged from the Cathar, a female, her tone not the guttural rage of Vrax, but the cold, clear precision of a razor. Her name was High Adjudicator Kalen, and she had been appointed to purge the doctrinal weakness that had led to the failure at Viridian. Her face, sharp and intelligent, filled the main view screen on the Indomitable's bridge. The Terran commander Rostova used a trick Kalen declared to the galaxy, her black eyes unblinking. She employed a coward's weapon, the enemy's own strength. This is not warfare. This is a corruption of the natural order. Strength must be answered with strength. An ultimatum is a test of will, and the Terran fleet has been found to have none. She's reframing the narrative, Jian said, standing beside Rostova. She's painting our strategy as a weakness, a refusal to engage in honorable combat. The low hum of the bridge electronics seemed to grow more menacing. She's laying the groundwork for her own brand of lesson, Rostova countered. Her eyes narrowed. She's smarter than Vrax, more dangerous. We must reflect a more perfect image of their folly. Kalen's broadcast continued. She announced that the Cathar Captain Gore had been executed for his failure to press the attack after Vrax's death. His crew was stripped of rank and sent to labor camps. The data packet Lysias had sent the seed of culture and philosophy had been publicly declared a bioweapon of the mind and purged. There would be no dialogue. There would be only the reassertion of doctrine. Then came the new ultimatum. It was not for a single colony. It was for a neutral territory, the gas giant Sarathos and its orbiting network of scientific research stations, a joint project of a dozen different species, including a small Terran contingent. Kalen's fleet had surrounded the system. Her terms were simple. The Terran Concordance would formally and publicly denounce Admiral Rostova's tactics as dishonorable and illegal. Rostova herself was to surrender to the Cathar for judgment. If they refused, the Sarathos stations would be destroyed one by one every hour. The timer began. 24 hours. A brace is needed for the coming storm. It's a trap, Lysias stated, its voice flat. Sarathos is located at a nexus of gravitic currents. The system is a tactical nightmare. Our mirror lattice would be useless there. The gravitational lensing would distort any reflection. She chose her ground well. Rostova admitted the faint scent of ozone in the recycled air, a sharp reminder of the power coiled within her ship. She has negated our primary advantage. The conflict triangle was now sharply defined. Rostova's moral line required her to protect the innocents at Sarathos. Kalen's doctrine demanded a public spectacle of submission, and Lysias's cold calculus was screaming that to engage was to walk into a perfectly prepared kill box. The odds of a successful direct assault were less than 3%. We cannot abandon them, Lysias, Rostova said, her voice a low command. Admiral, a direct confrontation would be a catastrophic loss of Terran life and assets, the AI countered. The most logical course of action is to sacrifice the stations and engage the Cathar in a longer, more strategic war of attrition. Logic does not always get a vote in matters of conscience. Rostova replied, her gaze fixed on the image of Kalen. We are going to Sarathos, and we are going to turn her perfect trap inside out. This is the test of our own doctrine. The plan they formulated was born of desperation and genius. Kalen expected a fleet. She expected a frontal assault or another trick with light. She would get neither. The Indomitable and its 5 fastest escort frigates would make the journey. The bulk of the fleet would remain behind, a strategic deception to make Kalen believe they were hesitant to engage. But the Terran ships would not be traveling alone. Tucked away in their cargo bays and attached to their hulls were hundreds of custom-built gravitic emitters. They were not weapons. They were tools designed for asteroid mining and stellar cartography. Rostova and Lysias had found a new purpose for them. A new lesson requires new tools. As they approached the Sarathos system, a civilian crew member on the science station Kepler's Hope transmitted a final desperate message. It was a young xenobotanist, her face pale with fear, but her voice steady. We know the odds are against us. She said, her transmission aimed at any who might be listening. But we are not surrendering to this darkness. Our work here is about understanding, about connection. We will hold to that to the end. Her message ended abruptly as Kalen jammed all outgoing signals. The Sarathos system was just as Lysias had described. The massive gas giant dominated the view screen, its swirling bands of orange and purple a beautiful, treacherous curtain. Kalen's fleet was positioned in a loose system-wide net, and just as they'd predicted, she had left a seemingly obvious path open, a direct route to the primary research station, Newton's Cradle. She's offering us an open corridor. Gian confirmed his station, humming with the strain of passive sensor sweeps. It's a classic ambush. The moment we enter, ships hidden within the planet's upper atmosphere and behind the major moons will emerge and will be caught in a crossfire. The bait is laid. The snare is set. Lysias is our guest in position, Rostova asked calmly. She could feel the familiar thrum of the deck plates, a steadying rhythm, in the face of impossible odds. Confirmed, Admiral, the AI replied. The decoy ship broadcasting your personal command codes on a low-power frequency has been acquired by a Cathar patrol. They have taken it in tow and are transporting it to Adjudicator Kalen's flagship, the Inevitable Judgment, as you instructed. This was the first piece of the new puzzle. A small, automated scout ship, disguised as a damaged Terran shuttle, had allowed itself to be captured. On board was a single piece of technology, a quantum entanglement communicator linked directly to Lysias. It was a listening device placed directly in the heart of the enemy's command ship. "We are proceeding down the corridor," Rostova ordered. The Indomitable and her escorts moved forward, their shields raised, looking for all the world, like a desperate, foolish rescue attempt. The first duty of a teacher is to meet the students' expectations. On the bridge of the Inevitable Judgment, Kalen watched the Terran ships advance. A cruel smile touched her lips. "Her arrogance is astounding," she said to her tactical officer. "She believes her own legend. She thinks she can walk into my fire and emerge unscathed." "All wings are in position, Adjudicator," the officer reported. "They will be in the optimal kill box in 7 minutes." Kalen leaned forward. "No. Let her get closer. Let her see the station. Let her taste the hope of a rescue. Then when she reaches for it, close the fist." Her words, spoken with chilling confidence, were heard 1,000 light-years away on the bridge of the Indomitable. Lysias's quantum receiver was working perfectly. "She is toying with us," Gian growled. "She wants to maximize the psychological impact." "She is giving us time," Rostova corrected. The ship shuddered slightly as it passed through a pocket of gravitic turbulence. "Every second she waits is another second for our devices to prime." She looked to her science officer. "Status on the gravitic emitters." "Deployed, Admiral," the officer confirmed. "They have been released into the corridor behind us, masked as routine engine debris. They are embedding themselves into the system's natural gravity currents, just as planned. One must learn the currents before one can redirect the river." The emitters were not creating a mirror. They were creating a lens. A massive, invisible, system-wide gravitic lens. They were not reflecting light. They were bending space-time itself subtly, but with immense precision. "We are 5 minutes from the station," Gian announced. The countdown timer for the first station's destruction was ticking ominously in the corner of his display, 5 minutes 12 seconds. "Kalen is ordering her hidden fleets to begin their final approach vectors," Lysias reported, relaying the intercepted command. "She is preparing to spring the trap." Rostova's heart pounded a steady drum against her ribs. This was the moment. The point of no return. The entire plan hinged on Kalen's arrogance, on her rigid adherence to a doctrine of overwhelming force. The weight of doctrine is the heaviest anchor of all. Lysias, Rostova said, her voice cutting through the tension like a diamond. "Activate the lens, now." On Kalen's view screen, nothing changed. The Terran ships continued their foolish advance, but on her tactical display, 1,000 alarms began to shriek at once. The projections of her own hidden ships began to drift. Their positions, once so precise, were suddenly wrong. Their firing solutions were no longer valid. "What is this?" Kalen demanded, her voice losing its icy calm for the first time. "Recalibrate sensors, confirm fleet positions." "Adjudicator." "The system's gravimetrics are in flux," her science officer cried out. "Our long-range sensors are... they're showing us echoes, ghost images. We cannot get a solid lock." The gravitic lens was active. It was not a massive brute force effect. It was a series of subtle, cascading distortions. It bent the paths of sensor rays. It warped the fabric of space just enough to make targeting at extreme range a matter of guesswork. The open corridor had become a hall of mirrors, but the reflections were of time and space itself. The universe has more ways to reflect than one. She is blinding them, Jian whispered, his eyes wide with dawning comprehension. Not just blinding them, Rostova said. We are giving them new targets. Lysias, using the data from Kalen's own bridge, began feeding false targeting information back to the Cathar fleet. Using their own encrypted channels spoofed with codes captured by the quantum listening device, Lysias began to issue phantom orders, confirming the ghost images on their distorted screens as real Terran ships. The greatest deception is the one you tell yourself. Fire. Kalen screamed, her composure shattering. Fire on all targets. Saturate the corridor. Her fleet obeyed. From the upper atmosphere of Sarathos, from the dark side of its moons, dozens of Cathar warships unleashed a torrent of plasma torpedoes and kinetic slugs. They were not firing at the Indomitable. They were firing at the gravitic ghosts of a Terran fleet that wasn't there. They were firing at each other. The open corridor, the perfect kill box, turned inside out. Cathar torpedoes, their guidance systems, confused by the warped space-time, slammed into Cathar cruisers. Kinetic slugs aimed at phantom frigates tore through the shields of their sister ships. The beautiful, perfect trap had sprung on its makers. On the bridge of the inevitable judgment, Kalen watched in horror as her disciplined fleet tore itself to pieces. Her tactical display was a sea of crimson alerts, a symphony of self-inflicted destruction. She had given the order. Her doctrine had demanded it. And her doctrine had just forced her to annihilate her own forces. The ledger is balanced in the currency of your own choosing. Cease fire! Cease fire! She shrieked, but it was too late. The chaos was absolute. The gravitic distortions, combined with the explosions of dying ships, had turned the entire area into a storm of shrapnel and radiation. In the midst of this self-made hell, the Indomitable and her 5 escorts moved with impossible grace. Lysias, immune to the gravitic distortions it was creating, navigated them through the carnage. They reached Newton's cradle just as its countdown timer hit 0. A single Cathar destroyer, wounded but still functional, broke from the chaos and charged them, its weapons glowing. Before it could fire one of the Indomitable's escort frigates, the Stalwart II, a ship named for the vessel damaged at Viridian, surged forward. It positioned itself between the station and the attacker, taking the full force of the enemy's desperate volley on its reinforced forward shields. The cost of victory was always paid willingly by her crew. Hull plating glowed cherry red from the heat, and the frigate's captain reported critical power fluctuations, but the line was held. The shield is as valuable as the sword, Lysias Rostova ordered, her voice grim. Broadcast on all channels. Open network. Show the entire galaxy what has happened here. And patch me through to Adjudicator Kalen. The channel opened. Kalen's face appeared on the screen. She was no longer the calm, confident ideologue. Her face was a mask of fury and disbelief, her bridge burning around her. "This is not possible," she whispered, staring at Rostova. "Your doctrine demanded a demonstration of strength." Adjudicator Rostova said, her voice echoing with the cold authority of a judge. "You have provided it. You have demonstrated more effectively than I ever could the fatal flaw in your philosophy. An ultimatum is a weapon that points in both directions. You built a kill box, and your own ideology forced you to trigger it on yourself." Rostova continued her words, a final crushing weight on the defeated adjudicator. "The stations are safe. Your fleet is broken. Your doctrine is a failure, its bankruptcy displayed for the entire galaxy to witness on a public ledger. This is the second lesson. I sincerely hope there is not a need for a third." The account is settled. She did not need to say more. Behind Kalen, a console exploded and the transmission died. The battle for Sarathos was over. In the aftermath, something remarkable happened. A signal emerged from the chaos of the Cathar fleet. It was an old code, one that hadn't been used in months. It was the command frequency of the late Captain Gore. A small but significant portion of the surviving Cathar ships, perhaps a full quarter of Kalen's original force, broke away from the main group. They turned their weapons not on the Terrans but on the remaining Loyalist ships. A civil war born of doctrinal schism had erupted in the heart of the Cathar fleet. The seed Lysias had planted had borne bitter, violent fruit, but fruit nonetheless. A reckoning cannot be denied. The public tally of the battle confirmed the impossible. Kalen's fleet had suffered 80% casualties, with over two-thirds of that number confirmed as self-inflicted. The policy of the ultimatum doctrine, once feared, was now seen as a galactic liability, a philosophy of self-destruction. The Interstellar Concordance, in an emergency session, voted to formally censure the Cathar Imperium, revoking key trade privileges until the doctrine was officially and publicly rescinded. The precedent Rostova had set at Viridian was now interstellar law. The gravitic emitters cooled, their purpose served. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the low hum of the engines was the only sound. The crew was silent, watching the fractured Cathar fleet begin to tear itself apart. This victory felt different, colder, more profound. Rostova knew her actions had not brought peace in a single stroke. They had instead lanced a festering wound at the heart of an empire, forcing a painful, necessary, and violent healing process. She had held the mirror up to their aggression, and now they were left to deal with the fractured reflection. The universe was not simpler now. It was more complicated, more dangerous, but also, for the first time in centuries, filled with the possibility of real change for the Cathar. She had taught them the cost, and now they had to learn the lesson for themselves. Their future is now their own to write.